Imagine being 12 years old when you're chosen to marry a king. Imagine spending the next 30 years of your life in an endless cycle of pregnancy, birth, and heartbreak. Imagine watching 23 tiny coffins being lowered into the ground, one after another, while you stand powerless to stop the cruel hand of fate. What if I told you that this nightmare was the reality for one forgotten queen, whose story of maternal suffering would shock even the most hardened historians? Today, we're uncovering the heartbreaking, unbelievable, and truly devastating story of Queen Darejan Dadiani of Georgia, the woman who holds the world record for royal childbearing but paid the ultimate price for it. She gave birth to 23 children in just under 3 decades, each delivery a roll of the dice with death. By the time we reach the end of her story, you'll understand why some historians call her the most tragic mother in royal history. In the 18th century Georgia, nestled between the mighty empires of Russia and Persia, royal women were expected to be nothing more than baby-making machines. The survival of entire kingdoms depended on their ability to produce male heirs. But what happened when that biological imperative became a prison of endless suffering? What you're about to hear isn't just one woman's story. It's a window into an era when women's bodies were battlegrounds for political survival, and when medicine couldn't save those who needed it most. In 1750, 12-year-old Darejan Dadiani was chosen to be the third wife of King Heraclius II of Georgia. The young princess came from the noble house of Mingrelia in western Georgia, and her fate was sealed before she could even understand what marriage meant. King Heraclius was already a widower twice over. His first 2 wives had died young, a grim foreshadowing of what awaited this child. The wedding was lavish, celebrated at the court in Tbilisi with all the pageantry befitting a royal union. But behind the silk and ceremony lay a stark reality. Darejan was not marrying for love, but for duty. Her tiny body would soon be expected to carry the future of the Georgian kingdom. The first child, Princess Eileen, was born in 1753 when Darejan was just 15 years old, followed by 22 more between 1755 and 1782. Think about that for a moment. 23 pregnancies in 29 years. That means Darejan spent virtually her entire adult life either pregnant, giving birth, or recovering from childbirth. In the 18th century, women were legally prohibited from giving birth alone. Birth attendants were required as witnesses, and births typically involved midwives and female attendants. Yet despite this constant presence of others, Darejan faced each labor knowing that neither she nor her child might survive. Around 1 in 200 births ended in the death of the mother, and infant mortality was even higher. Here's where Darejan's story becomes truly devastating. Of her 23 children, only 13 reached adulthood. That means she buried 10 of her babies, 10 tiny lives that flickered out before they could truly begin. Some died within hours of birth. Others survived just long enough for her to bond with them before disease or complications took them away. Princess Sophia, born around 1756, died in childhood. Prince Ioan, born around 1759, died in childhood. Prince Soslin David lived only from 1764 to 1767. 3 precious years before he was taken from her. The names pile up like a litany of grief. Child after child, hope after hope, loss after loss. But Darejan's suffering wasn't just personal. It was political. As her sons grew up, Darejan's desire to secure the right of succession for her offspring against Heraclius's eldest surviving son from his second marriage became the cornerstone of her involvement in Georgian politics. Every pregnancy carried the weight of dynastic hopes. Every son who died was not just a personal tragedy, but a political disaster. The queen, who had given everything for her kingdom, found herself fighting for her surviving children's rights to rule it. In 1791, she persuaded her husband to overturn the principle of primogeniture in favor of fraternal inheritance, mandating in his will that after George's death, the throne would pass to the next surviving son of Heraclius rather than to George's offspring. After King Heraclius died in 1798, Darejan's life took an even darker turn. Queen Dowager Darejan had been skeptical of Georgia's rapprochement with the Russian Empire, especially after the Russians had left the Georgians to their own devices in the face of a disastrous invasion from Iran in 1795. She had repeatedly maintained that the relationship with Russia had brought no benefit to Georgia. Her fears proved prophetic. In July 1800, her stepson George XII forced Queen Dowager Darejan into confinement at her palace in Avlabari. The woman who had sacrificed her body, her health, and her children for Georgia was now a prisoner in her own kingdom. The final chapters of Darejan's life read like a Greek tragedy. Russia annexed the entire Georgian kingdom, bringing their rule to an end. Darejan was allowed to settle in Russia. Known to the Russians as the Tsaritsa Daria Georgievna, she was allowed to settle down in St. Petersburg, where she lived in a rented house. A woman who had once been the Queen of Georgia, mother to 23 children, now living as an exile in a foreign land. She died on the 8th of November, 1807, at the age of 69. Queen Dowager Darejan was buried at the Annunciation Church of the Alexander Nevsky Lavra, far from the Georgian soil she had bled for. Modern historians believe they understand what tormented Darejan throughout her reproductive years. It is widely believed that Queen Anne of Great Britain, who faced similar reproductive tragedies, suffered from antiphospholipid syndrome, an immune disorder that turns the body against itself. Similar conditions may have plagued Darejan, making each pregnancy a battle against her own biology. In an era before modern medicine, before understanding of blood types, infections, or basic hygiene, women like Darejan were expected to keep trying, keep suffering, keep hoping that the next child would survive. Their bodies were not their own. They belonged to the state, to the dynasty, to the endless hungry maw of royal succession. From the palaces of Tbilisi to the exile of St. Petersburg, from the hope of a 12-year-old bride to the grief of a mother who buried 10 children, Queen Darejan Dadiani's story reminds us that behind every crown lies a human being. Her 23 pregnancies represent not just a statistical record, but 23 times she risked everything for duty, for kingdom, for the slim hope that this time this child might survive and thrive. In an age when we debate women's reproductive rights and bodily autonomy, Darejan's story serves as a haunting reminder of what happens when women's bodies become political battlegrounds. She was alone not because she lacked attendants or midwives, but because in the end, no one could share the burden of her suffering, the weight of her losses, or the crushing responsibility of royal motherhood. Queen Darejan Dadiani, the forgotten mother who gave everything and lost almost all. Her legacy lives on not in the children who survived, but in the reminder that every historical statistic represents a real person who laughed, cried, hoped, and suffered just as we do today. What do you think? Could you have endured what Queen Darejan faced? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from history's shadows.